Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and my humor is about as real as the imaginary number. Only math-oriented people will get that joke. But hold up. What's this? At the time I'm writing this script, this channel has 140,000 subscribers. The past few months have been absolutely fantastic for views and subs, so thanks for checking out my content. But what I'm going to do today is bring you a revised theory. If you are new or you don't know what I mean, a revised theory is where I take one of my older videos and improve it by making it more plausible, better edited, and better explained. I do it rarely, but it's fun to look back at them. So let's get into this one. The video I will be revising today is an extremely short video I made on Monsters, Inc. This video was underviewed, had a robotic voice in the background, and was only a minute long, and because it was so poorly explained, I must bring back this idea today to show you all. Monstropolis needs monsters to gather the screams of children in order to fuel their city. Ugh, sounds creepy when I say it like that. But if you're wondering how they could possibly do this, well, I believe I know. The monsters could be harnessing the children's sound energy, which explains why the louder they scream, the more energy the monsters receive. And when they say laughter is more powerful, that makes sense, as a long, loud laugh will give off more energy when doing the actual math. But basically, the monsters are clearly converting whatever essence human laughter has through loudness into energy. And in the movie, there is a severe energy crisis. So what causes this? Let's get into it. Mr. Waternoose controls all of the doors and the whole facility, so he should know all of what is going on. He tells Sullivan and a few others that kids just aren't as scared as they used to be, but he has been shown to be an excessive liar, doing anything to benefit the company. He says he'll kidnap 1,000 children and silence the snitches just to save his company, and I'm thinking that maybe in the past he has done all of this before. That's terrifying, but it's not the point of this theory, so let's shift our focus back to my actual idea. You could argue that he was telling the truth, and that with the progression of violent movies and video games, kids seriously aren't that scared anymore. This door scaring method clearly used to work, but at some point it became inefficient, and it only took a few years. So why did it stop working? Kids don't just suddenly change for little to no reason. If a kid watched Saw and Kill Bill, but then had a huge, fluffy, spiky, purple-blue, polka-dotted horned bear come out of their closet, they'd jump out their window. Films and games wouldn't faze kids in that way. No, the shortage really occurs when Sully and Mike get to the factory. And Randall. If you're one of the 8,000 people who watched my initial theory, you know exactly where I'm going with this. Strap in, I'm about to go nutty conspiracy theorist on y'all. Wanting to become more popular than Sullivan, Randall redirects a ton of hard-earned sound energy to his power-sucking machine and causes the energy crisis to become much more severe than before. He gets Waternoose on board to fund his project by manipulating him with the blind thought that his company was failing, putting him into a state of panic after 3 generations of perfection. This would force Waternoose, Monstropolis, and the employees of Monsters Incorporated to turn to his revolutionary machine, which would skyrocket him into popularity for saving a city's electricity. And that was what I was trying to get across before. But now let's actually look at how each aspect of it fully applies. Randall has been shown to be extremely envious of Sullivan, and he constantly tries beating him. During the Scream Extractor scene, Mike asked him if he was being evil so he could do things to get popular. Randall completely denied it. But we know that's a lie. How? Well, Waternoose tells Randall that he is half as scary as Sullivan, and Randall glares at him with anger. If that is not enough to prove that this whole thing was just out of jealousy, then how about when he literally is killing Sullivan, and he says how he's going to be #1? Quite the odd prediction, unless he knew that his machine was going to make him popular. Now the energy redirection part. In the tunnels of this facility, all of the wires, electricity, and power redirection occurs. All of the Scream canisters are held and exported in these tunnels. Everything to do with power. All of the cords. And this machine uses a ton of power. Its plug, massive, and it uses dozens of huge cords to function. This is a waste of so much hard-earned power. There are so many scare floors, and this machine is using up all of that energy, time, and money. Randall is taking it all, and this machine is a part of it. This plan only increases the intensity of the crisis. Also, if something happens during export, the rest of the process will be messed up. That's how everything works. So since this facility is the power export and the whole city is messed up, it can be assumed that something in this factory is wrong. This many scare floors, it's been working for years. Things don't just suddenly change. It's when Randall got there. Now this part. Waternoose had no idea where all of the power was going. He knew that there was an increase in dead doors, but was still confused. When Randall approaches him with the Scream Extractor idea, Waternoose is desperate. Randall has legitimately caused the biggest and most secretive loss of energy in the history of Monstropolis, and then he manipulates his boss into funding his machine. Waternoose is clearly very desperate. He knows just how shameful it would be to let down a huge company after it was in his family for 3 generations. He can't take it, and is easily blindly manipulated by Randall in an act of sheer desperation. And finally, the whole point of this, Randall's jealousy. He redirects the energy to his wasteful machine, manipulates the CEO, and then hopes that everybody will find his machine as a savior to the power crisis he heavily added to. Now that is villainous. Notice how confident he is that his whole plan will work. He says in the change room that he knows he will win. He says it so eerily. The winds of change. And he wasn't referring to the Scream Extractor, oh no. Clearly, that was the attitude of a winner. A jealous, sore loser, finally, maniacally happy to win. Then one scene later on the scare floor, Sullivan says, "May the best monster win," and Randall says, I plan to. I told you so. This whole thing was for his popularity. But I'm not done. Oh no, I have lots to add. About Roz, actually. Yes, the sluggish CEO of the CDA. I want to finally figure out what exactly the CDA does. Well, I hear you informally verbalizing, they child detect. Yes, but not in the way the movie may have you believe at first glance. I actually think that they might have created the rumor that kids were dangerous, as it could allow them to catch the kidnappers. The CDA is out there to protect kids, not prevent them. Now that's something. What did they do on the night Boo got out? They put spotlights on several monsters, which is a bit weird. Unless you consider that they were looking for the kidnappers, thinking that the kid was with them. Yes, these are clever observations. And before I go, I want to readdress that very first point. The point I made about Waternoose and Randall kidnapping others before Boo. If Roz was undercover, it means that there was a previous outbreak of child kidnappings that the CDA was made aware of. Wait, but that means Randall and Waternoose have been doing this forever. Just how long has Roz been working there? 2.5 years, according to her. But all of this leaves one final question. Where did those children go? Well, they can't be released into the city, and a machine like this kills, so that means they've killed the kids. And what does Waternoose say? I'll kidnap 1,000 children. He'd do it, and he began to. Feel that? I sure did. Childhoods everywhere shattering at that thought. A murderous, deranged, and misunderstood crustacean, and a manipulative, jealous, insane reptilian. They actually killed. That's the most chilling discovery I've made all year, and now I will abruptly leave you with those messed up thoughts. Until next time, Despite the fact that I've made a whole 4 theories on Monsters, Inc., here's another one. It's one of my favorite films by Pixar, and I must say, this video I made is one of the best theories on my channel. I absolutely loved the way it turned out. And there was a little something I very briefly mentioned at the end of this video that I think warrants a whole separate video of its own. I've done this before with The Incredibles, mentioning something at the end, and then making a whole theory on it. Same with Up, and a few others. So don't think of this as a part 2 because it is not. Although not many people seem to mind that I'm making sequels to other recent videos, I just want to point out that really these aren't sequels. I just have to say part 2 in the title because of the way I formatted my channel. So without any more unnecessary ado, here's some stuff I've gathered on our voluptuous little garden snail. Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and Monsters, Inc. is a monster movie. Halloween draws near, there's no question about whether or not to do this. But like I sometimes do at the end of theories, in the last couple minutes of my revised Randolph theory I posted a year ago, I briefly mentioned something that changed my entire perspective on the film, which is why I mentioned it. Watch that video immediately if you haven't, it is a great one, but what I briefly said was that Roz was the one who spread the rumor that kids are toxic, so that it would let her single out the people who had been kidnapping kids for the past 2.5 years. Since my video, intellectual debate has sparked in my comments, and videos from some other channels also cropped up with similar ideas regarding the CDA, but now it's time to expand on this because it is very, very likely to be correct that she spread this rumor. First, the evidence I presented in that old video. The CDA intentionally labels themselves as the Child Detection Agency rather than the Child Prevention Agency, or the Child Elimination Agency. All they are there to do is detect children and collect them. But not likely for the safety of the other monsters, because as we know, humans are utterly harmless to monsters. It's for the safety of the kids. So if the higher-up directors of the CDA were to create this rumor, it would allow them to pinpoint exactly who had been kidnapping children, because those monsters wouldn't worry about touching the kids. As Roz says, she's been doing this undercover work for 2.5 years now. We do in fact know that the rumor has been around for a very long time though. We see it in effect during Monsters University, as it was likely precautionary back then to keep monsters away from injuring kids, but now it's mandatory to capture the ones building the Scream Extractor. The other rather significant piece of evidence I presented was the sheer fact that, on the night Boo escaped, the CDA shot huge spotlights down at monsters only. This would make complete and total sense. They obviously believe that the child will be found with the monsters who have been kidnapping them, so they start beaming down all of the monsters. Something I didn't mention in that other theory though is that I'm pretty sure the multiple monsters they put lights on were actually the same ones from Sully's scare floor, which makes sense. They're looking for the culprits. Something else I did not mention is the blatant hatred Roz shows towards Mike. It's because he and Sully are also suspects, because they too are on the kidnapping scare floor. It's why she is so adamant about their paperwork as proof of what they are or are not doing. And Mike condescendingly tells her it would be better if it all just blew away, which makes her livid, as it's making him an even bigger suspect despite her suspicions of Randall and Waternoose. Even at the end of the movie, she says 2.5 years of undercover work were almost wasted. This is obviously because Sully and Mike intercepted the child and could therefore be caught as the criminals, as Randall and Waternoose slipped right on by, which would render everything she did useless in the end. So already I've just provided some new solid evidence, some evidence that really, honestly stares us directly in the face throughout the entire movie, but only really makes sense after my theory has been proposed. Detective work is so much fun. My god, it's the most awesome thing to do. But there is way more, because I don't think the whole CDA knew that it was literally them that spread the rumor of toxic children. If you look at them, even at the very end of the movie when all is revealed, they still jump and shudder when Boo walks by them. And after returning to the comments section of the, I guess you could call it sort of part 1 to this video, I saw someone with ideas that paralleled mine. and they got super intelligent with the concept, bringing to light how many of the workers simply vacuum up the toys like it's nothing. It's true, and in my response to them, I finally provided an explanation. If the majority of the workers are taught that their work is very dangerous and that they have to find the kids or everyone will die, they will be 100 times more effective at doing their true job that they don't even know about. In the wise words of Psycho Sheep Bellwether, fear always works. This is also Mr. Waternoose's philosophy with his very own workers. Funny enough, the end of Zootopia with the replay of Mayor Bellwether's incriminating words is damn near identical to this movie's end climax with Waternoose's incrimination. Just a neat thing I caught on to. But Roz and her direct team of probably around 10 other high-ranking employees, they know the truth. Kids are not toxic. Something interesting I noted this time I ran through the movie was that out of the thousands of CDA employees, number 2 was the one that went up to Sullivan and asked for his autograph right during the Boo fiasco when she was roaming the halls. I have a 90% guarantee that he was either going to use Sullivan's signature for something, or he was trying to manipulate information out of him as he was in a state of panic upon losing Boo. If he is in fact number 2, that would make him Roz's right-hand man, and he'd be in on it, knowing of Sullivan being suspected as a child murderer. Recently, there have been some people who've looked at the CDA's code 2319. If you break down 23 and 19 into number letters, each one represents a W and an S. Some say it stands for white sock, but that makes very little sense. It's very, very, very coincidental. But others claim that it stands for the last names of Mike and Sully, Wazowski and Sullivan. But other than it being a possible Easter egg, nobody really knew why their names would be attributed with the CDA alert code, unless, oh yes, you consider my theory that they were always heavily suspected by Roz. The sheer fact that Roz says she's always watching Mike and Sully is blatant proof that she suspects them, and by extension, that my whole theory of her and her supposed team of 10 and her alleged rumor spreading is correct. And come to think of it, at the end of Monsters University, we get a Roz cameo, and she says that after Mike and Sully traveled back from the human world, she'd always be watching them. Which is why I guarantee the CDA's code is referencing them. So if Roz was suspicious of kidnappers even back then, it appears as though, oh my god. Oh my god! Another childhood-ruining moment is now approaching. If you wish to keep your young, precious memories intact, turn back now. Roz apparently is saying here that the kids were being kidnapped way back when, even before Randall got to Monsters Incorporated. And this was a crooked point of my old theory that didn't quite fit, but now I know why. If kids had been disappearing even back then, it makes total sense why the rumors were created. Screw what I said before, it wasn't just precautionary. It was mandatory, even back in the university days. It means that Mr. Waternoose was kidnapping for years, not just when Randall got there. All Randall did was make it more efficient by creating the Scream Extractor. And do not forget what Mr. Waternoose said. He said he'd kidnap 1,000 children before he let his company die. In my last vid, I said that he and Randall were guaranteed to have kidnapped hundreds of children for experimentation and killed them. That's why Roz was investigating in the first place. But if it was done before Randall, it means Mr. Waternoose has been testing new ways to crack children for decades. And his father and his grandfather, who founded Monsters Incorporated, were likely also doing this. The horrific generations of malevolent crustaceans. Tell me right now, what would prompt some random dude to create a door portal and then go into a human's room and then learn that scaring them gives off energy? How would he even know what a human is? How would they learn about the entire world map the humans have? How would they connect portals to human bedroom doors? Unless they'd actually gone in there and founded their company on the death and torture of children. When we look at the files of the children they scare, we even see their pictures and absolutely all information about them. Unless the monsters go in there with a camera, how on earth are these pictures snapped? How do they know so much over the course of only 3 generations of work? How do screams affect energy? None of it makes sense. How would they test these things? It all lies in the Waternoose family and the sinisterness they produce. If this horrific family has been kidnapping for years under the cover of a simple door entering and scaring, then it makes sense why the CDA was formed in the first place. How much do you want to bet that Roz was one of the very first scarer workers at Monsters Incorporated? The smart old bag would have picked up on the malice immediately, and after quitting would have formed a company that claims to assist the Incorporation, when, like Monsters Inc. themselves, the CDA had a secret agenda. But their agenda, Roz's agenda, was to expose them, to bust them wide open for child murder, child torture, and a wickedly heinous conspiracy, all under the cover of a rude old lady who spent years worth of espionage in the most information-filled job possible in the facility in order to figure out what exactly was going on in the walls of the building. Oh hell, this flips my other video completely upside down. It wasn't Randall who manipulated Waternoose, it was Waternoose who manipulated Randall by making Randall think that it was the other way around. To give Randall the feeling of power, to let him win for once in his life, to expose the deep feelings he'd always had to beat Sully. Go to bed with nightmares or a shattered childhood, I don't mind. I'm just doing this to greatly improve the lore, not break the movie. I love this job. Until next time, I'm the Theorizer. After Halloween, I'll be taking a week-long break, and then back to more epically awesome, bigger and better theorizations. Waternoose is a psychopathic child kidnapper who inherited his grandfather's company, which harvested energy from youthful human children. Roz was one of the company's original scare workers, and she was also one of the only monsters who'd ever realized the horrific truth behind what was really going on behind the scenes. So she left and constructed the CDA, a company that aims to help monsters by decontaminating humans, when in reality, their secret agenda, known only by the higher-ups, is to bust Monsters Inc. wide open and reveal the truths behind their treacherousness. This was my collective conclusion to my last 2 videos on Monsters Inc., which I'd heavily recommend you watch immediately. Part 1 is the build-up, and Part 2 is one of the best videos I have ever created. Watch them before this one, because today we bring a close to this trilogy of videos as we delve deeper into Roz's history with Monsters Incorporated, what may have prompted her to create the CDA, and what exactly the Waternoose family has been doing for all of those villainous decades. Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and Mr. Waternoose was raised into his family of child-killing crustaceans who he aimed to please, as we know full well at this point. And Roz dedicated her life after scaring to exposing the horrors of this incorporation. As I questioned last video, what exactly would prompt a monster like Mr. Waternoose's grandpa to start up this business, or rather, what would prompt him to somehow create a door portal to a world of humans? Over time, it seems, Monsters Incorporated managed to get the entire world map of the humans, and they've also managed to snap incredibly suspicious pictures of many of the kids. As I said, they managed to harvest all of the details on the human children, but how did they get the info? Their names. As I pointed out last time, and many commenters agreed with me, these pictures look as if they were taken in the monster world, especially what with the industrial flooring scene behind the child, like the floor in Monsters Inc. And what is the child staring at? Basically, this photo was taken very hastily by a monster, but it's implied that they have photos like this for every child, and none of the scare workers question it. What's going on here? Well, clearly the kids have been kidnapped and questioned on their information. This is incredibly frightening. It also, in fact, means that Waternoose has kidnapped adults in the past, explaining how he gained all of the information that he did on the human world. And Waternoose is efficient at kidnapping and keeping it under wraps. He's even taught Randall his methods. Boo isn't the first child. The Waternoose family has been doing this constantly every day for decades. Seriously, it's very freaky. The sheer level of information they have regarding the human world, and more specifically, the individual children themselves, is horrifying. So of course I do in fact believe that they've gotten thousands of kids kidnapped, killed, tested on, which makes sense because of just how deeply humans fear the monsters. I mean, what kind of crazy myths do you think the humans are sharing around after losing their children to monsters in the night? Kind of freaky. But Roz clearly is the key in this big lock, as she was the one who aimed to shut down the operation. It's my theory that she encountered some high-ranking monsters in the middle of some of their horrific testing, and she quit to put an end to it. Clearly she didn't know it was Waternoose specifically who was running it, because later in the film she claims she had no idea this treachery was all the way up at the CEO level. But it's certain that she did see some of Waternoose's henchmen doing evil stuff, and this all makes excellent sense. She returned as an administrator to stop the bad guys, but learnt in the end the truth of the CEO. But let's talk about her job in administration for a moment. Before even coming back to the company, she already knew exactly which scare floor she would be working on. She knew right where to go to find the kidnappers. Perhaps there had been some misplaced files due to the kidnappings, which stuck out like a beacon in her analysis. Clearly then, her very specific job, administration, was all to see specifically which files were abnormal in order to catch the culprits. By selecting the very specific job where she became a hub of information, as I said last video, that's why she shows such suspicion and hatred towards Mike and Sully, claiming she's watching them closely, because of Mike's sarcasm and failing to hand in the papers. When Mike and Sully failed to bring in the papers, Roz immediately became suspicious of them, assuming it was because they were guilty. This almost ruined 2.5 years of her undercover work. What I find brilliantly perfect was that this movie took place right around the point where the entire CDA began infiltrating the facility. It was almost like Roz was just waiting, desperately hoping that something would go wrong on the scare floor so she'd have an excuse to have the CDA search the incorporation for evidence of a child murder. This was the climax of her plan, I believe. And what was it that caused the CDA's whole search again? Well, the fact that Boo was let out into Monstropolis. And what caused this? Boo escaping her door due to Sully while Randall was busy. Someone like Roz is going to be monitoring this floor 24/7, and I highly doubt she'd miss something as big as this. Randall, being a little idiot, for some reason left Boo's door unattended while he was out getting the capture equipment. This is odd, because Randall isn't usually this stupid. However, my point is, he was away for quite some time, even before Sully got there. This could easily provide an open opportunity for Roz to intervene. Boo somehow constantly teleports around, but her first quote-unquote teleportation was the most abnormal and unbelievable, as it literally involved sneaking through the open door that Sully was completely covering. So, I believe that Roz's spies had a hand in letting Boo out, while Randall was otherwise distracted. I also think it was more of Roz's CDA workers out of costume that caused Randall this distraction, almost like a whole entire staged busting of the bad guy, but Sullivan got in the way. Hence why Roz says everything was almost wasted. It's almost like Boo was already out of the room before Sully entered it. It must have been the CDA who let her out. I mean, seriously, they have a hand in all of this. Roz needed an excuse to have the entire building searched for evidence, but the only way to do that would be by distracting a suspected kidnapper and letting a child escape. I seriously think this, and the logic is real. The plan is required because first of all, she cannot make an arrest without the plenty of evidence she had yet to gather, and secondly, Roz had no idea if Randall had other associates, but this, it's an ideal plan. It works to find everything and bust it all wide open. It's perfect. And other than the unexpected interventions of Sully and Mike, it worked brilliantly. Another neat thing to note, however, is that when Mike approaches Roz and tells her that Randall was working late last night, Roz almost immediately closes her metal window. This is abrupt. She claims her office is now closed, but that's not true. Do you know what is true? Roz learning that Mike too suspects Randall. It's all about that. The reason she slammed her window is because of that one small thing he said about Randall. She needed to inform her associates of the new developments. It's very neat, all of this interconnected lore. There's just one final problem in all of this. Why was it the CDA who escorted Waternoose to prison? They aren't the police, certainly. They are an agency for child protection masquerading as an extermination team. I certainly don't think Waternoose was working with Roz the whole time and they escorted him away as an escape. No. Quite the opposite, obviously. I believe that the CDA didn't want police involvement because Roz had her own kind of special punishment for Mr. Waternoose. Not torture, though, and not a cruel and secretive death penalty, but more or less the act of sending him to the human world, just like Randall was. A perfect torment, logically. And my backup for this is the fact that they didn't even try to go after Randall, despite the fact that he could have easily found another door and gotten back into the monster world. In the chase scene, Randall chases the protagonist through the human world, but there are magic doors everywhere. Randall could easily come back if he manages to trace the times and locations of the scaring, but the CDA doesn't bother taking any more precautions. This is the fate of the villains. It's also a perfect torture, because it's what Waternoose did to exile his disobedient staff. The CDA wants to exile Randall and Waternoose to the human world, and Randall was already there. If they ever come back to Monstropolis, they'll either be killed or sent right back through. There's no point in them returning. They'd just be targets of an enormous manhunt. Really, the CDA took Waternoose because they don't want the police to deal with it. Either the police wouldn't care about the humans he killed, which is why Roz took him, or the police would care so much they'd kill him, which is why Roz took him. It's all coming together and it's excellent. Mr. Waternoose is a brilliantly flawed individual. Roz is the perfect savior, and I love Monsters, Inc. Until next time, I'm the Theorizer.